explained to UAC, hasn't ever been explained to me. So my question is, how does DIMP come up with the answer that these particular gas pipes are the gas pipes you have to replace next? And you know, so while the trench is open, you replace water pipes because you do that while the trench is open, but they might not otherwise have to be replaced for a while. So since you're watching out for the city's interest, if UHC could get kind of a formal presentation on how DIMP works, who makes it work, where the data comes from, are there computers involved, and so forth. And finally, for the water portion of the downtown project, I know purple pipes have been mentioned here before as a possibility, and normally the answer has always been, yeah, but it's going to be too expensive. But I guess my question is, were they going to be too expensive even if the trench is already open? And another point is that as long as you have only one pipe for water, it has to be big enough to serve the fire hydrants with enough water pressure. But if they didn't have to do that, you probably want to size it to minimize the age of the water in the pipes for drinking purposes, because the less time the water stays in the pipes, the fewer disinfectant byproducts are formed in it. So is there an analysis of that? And I think that's all I have to say on that topic. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I'd like to note that Vice Mayor Filsis has joined the utilities staff.
Any other oral communications? Okay. Moving on to approval of the minutes. Any comments on the minutes?
Move approval.
All right.
Second.
Second. All right. Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
All in favor? So agenda item 4, agenda review and revisions. I don't believe we have any need to change the agenda. Does anyone else have any concerns? Okay. Moving on to item 5, reports from commissioner meetings and events.
So on December 11th, I went to a pricing workshop at the California Public Utility Commission. It was actually a 2-day event, and I didn't get to go up for the second day. So they had some expert panels, and basically what they were discussing was sort of what were the trade-offs between doing demand pricing versus just doing it for the marginal cost, based on the marginal cost of the fuel. And so the debate that was the most significant debate was on that concept. And and while we're not governed by the CPUC, I know that there are other municipal utilities that are looking at this, particularly with increasing amounts of distributed energy resources, that if people are putting solar on their roofs and more people are doing it, or lots of people are getting EVs and we have to put in additional infrastructure to support them, how are we allocating what is a true cost of service? And if the utility, for example, if we have houses that are running electricity, that are using electricity at night or in the morning when our solar plants aren't working and we have to get capacity in order to meet those needs, that even if somebody is generating solar power during the high point of the day, the utility still has to have the capacity in place to be able to run things at night. And so that was, I think there are videos of that discussion that are available online if anybody's interested. I realize it can seem a little arcane, but I think it's something that we should be thinking about as we move forward, and in our next pricing discussion, maybe we can, discussion of rates, that perhaps we can talk about that, because I think it's it's an item that a lot of jurisdictions are wrestling with. So not just in California, but in other places, and it sort of is a more subtle thing that has to be discussed in terms of just general cost of service. So I'd like to see us get a little more involved in that conversation.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. Ed, the General Manager of Utilities report.
Very good, thank you. Commissioners, I have a few items to bring you up to date on. Some areas of some notable activity both at the federal and regional level over the last month, including, as you might have heard, action by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, related to the topic of grid resilience. As the Commission has discussed, and we'll come back to it in our strategic plan, this topic in general is one of interest to our community, but as it specifically relates at the federal level, note that back in September, the Department of Energy Secretary Rick Perry requested that FERC initiate a rulemaking proceeding to impose certain rules and regulations on regional transmission organizations and independent system operators, such as the Cal ISO, to ensure certain reliability and resilience attributes of electric generation resources are fully valued. This move was considered to be in direct support of baseload fossil fuels, notably coal, nuclear energy, and anti-renewable resources such as wind and solar. Many industry stakeholders, including Palo Alto through the Northern California Power Agency, opposed the directive and called on FERC to reject the rulemaking. These stakeholders contended that the proceeding was unnecessary and could potentially lead to new payments in support of coal and nuclear plants. Last week, FERC sustained the industry concerns and rejected the proceeding on a unanimous 5-0 vote. The Commission noted the importance of resiliency through the same order initiating a new proceeding to evaluate the resilience of the bulk electric system throughout the nation. Regional transmission operators and independent system operators will have 60 days to address how their respective organizations will incorporate resiliency into their system operations. NCPA intends to talk about this issue with FERC commissioners and staff during our annual federal policy conference in April. Palo Alto staff will be working with NCPA to ensure that our interests are heard. A little closer, but also in the federal arena, on the topic of Western Area Power Administration. The Bureau of Reclamation and the Western Area Power Administration, affectionately known as WAPA, have begun meeting with Central Valley Project power customers, including Palo Alto and other stakeholders, regarding their proposal to provide taxpayer relief to power customers. This is an attempt to incentivize power customers to extend our Western-based resource contracts beyond the year 2024. We've discussed some to date and will be in upcoming agendas as well for an additional 30 years. Reclamation's latest proposal is to provide power customers with $92 million in ratepayer relief through a series of credits through future WAPA bills. The first credit of $10 million would start in April 2018, with Palo Alto's share being $1.23 million or $3 to $4 per megawatt hour, depending on hydro conditions. This proposal, and we bring it up to familiarize you with some of the ongoing discussions, and of course we'll have more detail in future agendas. Proposal is being referred to as crossets, so you'll hear that term come up again in the future. In case you're tracking it, CROFFSETS, crossets, which is based on the expenditure credits and offsets report that tracks all Central Valley Project Improvement Act Restoration Fund reserves and expenditures to date, really from 1992 to 2016. This report shows approximately $1.7 billion spent on CVPIA mitigation projects, and that of that amount, power customers contributed approximately $386 million, exceeding our accounting obligation by about $92 million. So these mitigation funds are intended to be used for environmental benefits such as fish habitat restoration throughout the project. So you have more to come on that. Now, within the state transmission access charge, rates. The California Independent System Operator recently initiated stakeholder proceeding to look into the possibility of changing the way that transmission access charges are assessed to Cal ISO participants. ISO staff recently issued a straw proposal in which they recommended changing from the current structure in which these charges are billed back on a purely volumetric basis to one that combines volumetric and peak demand components. Such a change has the potential to reduce Palo Alto's overall transmission costs. Utility staff are closely following this proceeding and will likely submit comments to Cal ISO straw proposal through NCPA in the upcoming month. Now, very close to home, here in Palo Alto, our net energy metering successor program is now in effect. Our original NEM program reached its capacity during the month of December and was extended by council action to the end of 2017. New solar customers will now, in January, be enrolled in the NEM successor program, which provides customers with credit for hourly energy generated and exported to the grid. With 62 new applications in December for reservation under the original NEM program, City surpassed our NEM capacity of 10.8 megawatts. Customers wanting to enroll in the original NEM program will be placed on a waiting list in the event additional capacity opens up. We have additional information on that program on our website, cityofpaloalto.org/solar. And then finally, last item, SunShare Solar Group Buy program. Final tallies are in, and Palo Alto was the top outreach partner in the 2017 Bay Area SunShares Group Buy Solar program, both in terms of the number of solar contracts signed and kilowatts of rooftop solar capacity that will be installed through the program. In Palo Alto, 29 residents signed contracts for a total of about 157 kilowatt of rooftop solar. Customers in all 9 Bay Area counties participating in the program contracted for a total of over 1 megawatt of solar capacity. Of that total, Palo Alto's share accounts for 14.5% of that solar capacity volume. Thanks as always to our very active and engaged environmental conscious community members. And that concludes my report.
Then moving on to commissioner comments. Okay. In unfinished business, we have none. And let me make sure I get the card in the right place. New business, item number 1, cross-border safety program update.
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Romel Antonio. I'm Senior Project Engineer at the City of Palo Alto Utilities Department, Water, Gas, Wastewater. And I'll be presenting to you the cross-border program update. My co-presenter here is Robert Iden, and we'll be fielding questions after the presentation. So the first couple slides will go over what was done to date, sort of recap what was done and bring everyone up to speed. And thereafter, we'll delve into the next steps, the schedule, the scope, and phase 2 work. And the goal of this presentation is to establish a solid framework of understanding and consensus going forward. So, let's see here. So, what exactly is a cross-border here? The key takeaways of this presentation is threefold. It's to understand the significance and why we're doing what we're doing, and to recap where we've been and where we're at with evaluating and quantifying the risks to the cross-border program, and also to present a phase 2 of where we're heading. A cross-border is a condition which exists when a new pipe, such as a gas main or service, is installed by trenchless construction methods through an intersecting different utility line, as shown by the sewer main example on Channing Avenue. And trenchless construction is nothing new. This method has been used by utilities and employed as a construction method since the 1970s. The touted benefits to the trenchless installation methods are that they're less expensive and require minimal surface disruption in comparison to the traditional open-cut construction methods. As you can see from the diagram here, a cross-bore is when the pipe, the main pipe, is penetrated by typically a gas line, and which presents a risk to the house and safety, public safety, overall. Since 1989, polyethylene gas service lines have been installed in the city through horizontal directional drilling. Installation methods. Other utilities such as water followed suit in 1996. Gas service pipe crossbores through wastewater laterals can cause backups due to its reduced cross-sectional area. Efforts to clear these blockages with mechanical equipment commonly used by plumbers may damage crossboard gas lines during the cleaning efforts, which causes natural gas to leak and migrate up the sewer lateral, possibly leading to the property, causing injury or possibly death during an explosion. On July 11, 2011, Council awarded a contract to Hydromax for the cross-bore investigation project. And all sewer laterals were included as part of the scope, but only a small percentage of it was addressed. We've got about a little over 18,000 laterals in the city, and due to the field impediments encountered, such as blockages, root intrusion, we weren't able to complete the whole assessment in the Phase 1 work. So Hydromax was essentially selected because of its specialization of this kind of work and availability of equipment to complete this project, and its demonstrated ability to meet the city's critical quality assurance and quality control requirements. And going in the clockwise direction, as you can see, the contractor would mark out the suspected crossbore, excavate, and expose. We have an example here on the exposed trench in the College Terrace area. All investigated sanitary sewer laterals were categorized into two categories as part of the Phase 1 work: completed category and efforts exhausted category. The completed category, which was comprised of about 7,160 laterals, in this category, they were fully investigated and a crossbore condition was not found, and the property was cleared from any risks.
Pardon the interruption, do the colors mean anything related to what was inspected and cleared? Or are they just areas of town?
Just an area of the map. For different
Yeah.
basins.
Yeah, so it's part of the collection system. Our collection system is broken up into these various sections of the city.
But that's also kind of just an aside, it's a good indicator how we actually go about cleaning our system too, starting in the upper sections of each of the basins and moving things down. But that's a separate piece.
The efforts exhausted category.
Shown here is partially inspected.
Yes. Partially inspected, comprised of 5,856 laterals. In this category were not fully inspected due to either maintenance or construction issues encountered at the time. Laterals in this category need additional investigation. Now, to complete the inspection of laterals in the efforts exhausted category, construction or maintenance work is required to remove the impediment conditions encountered, which may include buried cleanouts, as mentioned previously, roots, offsets, angled pipes, and no access in the private and public segments of the lateral, thus preventing proper inspection completion of the laterals. The total number of all active sanitary sewer laterals within the city of Palo Alto is 18,040 laterals. And as of December 31st, 2013, Hydromax investigated 13,022 sewer laterals, which was approximately 28% of the total laterals within the city. So, approximately 28% of total laterals.
Should be remaining.
Actually, yeah, 28%, pardon me, 28% of total laterals were not investigated, which is 5,018, giving rise to the current Phase 2 efforts. The criteria for prioritization was evaluated using our in-house records. The recommended Phase 2 addresses roughly about 15% of the remaining laterals. The total cost for the remaining laterals include both excavation and 50%, with some required construction, was estimated to cost about $19 million. This current phase is estimated, Phase 2, to be about $3 to $4 million. To date,
I'm sorry, can you,
yes.
you had 3 to 4 million and you had 9 million, 19 million, what was that for?
19 million would be to complete investigation of all laterals, including the work that was required for the ones that had been investigated in Phase 2 but not completed because of obstructions. And so there was, given what was learned in that first phase, there was an assumption on the same kind of obstructions we would find in the remaining pool of laterals. So that was, we were estimating there how much work would be required.
Yeah, the assumption is basically every other lateral would require some construction. And the construction is based on either as simple as maybe locating and identifying and uncovering a clean out to actually cutting into a line and getting access, which may require installing a clean out or, or multiple things that can happen. So in the first phase, it was strictly a TV assessment. And this second phase now, we're going after a select group to fully investigate, and it's what it's going to take, TV inspection and a combination of construction to get at it.
So we had 11 categories, and we were looking at the laterals that had not been inspected at all, and those that had been partially and unable to complete. And so out of those, the top 4 categories was about 2,000 laterals that we are recommending for Phase 2.
So out of the 11 categories previously prioritized and categorized, 4 of them, as you see, is the highest risk factors that we're delving into for Phase 2. To date, completed evaluations of the sanitary sewer laterals performed was based on the following. The installation date, high priority occupancy properties such as schools and hospitals, excess flow valves, EFVs, for gas services. EFVs, City of Palo Alto began installing excess flow valves on residential gas customers in 1999, and more recently on commercial customer services. These EFVs, these valve stops, Essentially, it stops the flow of gas when the volume increases beyond a preset rate, which would occur if a service pipeline is severed during an event such as a dig-in or an earthquake. City of Palo Alto Utilities has adopted this practice well in advance of the Department of Transportation mandatory requirement enacted back in December of 2009. Gas service and horizontal separation distances between the sanitary sewer lateral is another prioritization criteria. Another prioritization criteria is the gas main crossing of sanitary sewer laterals. And lastly, gas service materials made of polyethylene pipe, as it was typically installed through trenchless construction methods. So using this criteria and lessons learned from the Phase 1 work, staff determined that the highest priority laterals for Phase 2 fell into the previous aforementioned groups. And what we're looking at is the next steps, the timeline. We had an audit conducted this past August 14th of 2017, and the results of the finding are as such. And that is going forward with the Phase 2 work, we have to collectively review prioritization risks, their analysis, and develop a final list of Phase 2 laterals and cost estimate, which we project will be completed by March 2018. Next is to update the missing laterals in our GIS system from the existing data. That'll take us to June 2018. And lastly is to review the National Association of Sewer Service Companies, NASCO, contract template language and incorporate relevant and useful provisions in the RFP. And that'll take place by August 2018. The RFP overall is a 4 to 6 month process, and we're looking to issue the RFP in 2018. The proposals will be completed and submitted September 2018. We'll interview the successful proposers and consultants September, and select and finalize the contract October 2018, and have a contract approval by December this year. The projected project kickoff for the Phase 2 efforts is in January next year, and completion of the remaining Phase 2 lateral work will be in February of 2022. And with that, we leave it up to the commissioners to ask questions for us to answer.
So it was unclear to me, do we allow a natural gas cross-bore in storm sewers?
That's not allowed either.
Yeah, it seems to me like that's an inherent disaster. Do we have any of those?
They actually, in the, I can't remember the exact year, it was like 2004, the Public Works did a CCTV of the storm sewers, and they found several crossbores in the storm sewers at that time. Whether they're more now than exist is a little different story, but yes, it's a potential problem. It was addressed back then. All these crossbores, as soon as we find a gas crossbore, it's addressed immediately. It's treated as a grade 1 leak, in which is they go on site right away and they dig it up and just like repair it. But again, you know, things happen, and that's part of the findings we found out through this project, was that just because you do this investigation and you clear it, you know, the storm was 2004. We just, you know, finished ours. It's a couple of years. However, things happened between the time we finished the crossbore project and now, there was already, there was a crossbore that we found that was a new crossbore. And so we headed that off at the gap. And you can only imagine over time, things like the storm may have other issues too.
We didn't address it in the slide, but if you go back a few slides, there about what we're doing currently and requirements for the CTV for any new gas lines going in. So, go back.
So after they put the new gas line in, they inspect to make sure they didn't create a crossbore?
Yeah, so they do a few things. In the past, we would actually do a proximity, we would observe a building, say we're doing whatever house, your house. You would look at the building too and look for clues that things have been changed, modified. So we do a visual check. And then we do the obvious checks like, okay, where's the gas meter, where's the sewer line? And beyond that, when things are cleared, we'll go ahead and after it's drilled in, we'll confirm that it was done properly without crossing the lateral. And sometimes we do find that there's a branch coming across that we didn't see. So, and that's after the fact of time. So we address that before we actually caught up the water.
So the three of you have mentioned that we saw several, I think 4 was the number of natural gas crossbores in storm sewers, and that those were fixed. What is the fix? Do we leave the line there and do something, or have we corrected it and pulled the natural gas line out?
Yeah, we corrected it. Back to the slide we had that we saw, you could see where, you know, the excavation was done, the gas line was on it. We don't have actually a picture here showing the gas line rerouted above the...
But it would be something like this where it looks like there's a rerouting around the line.
Yeah, this is the actual crossbore in both cases there. But we would reroute it, we would, if it's possible to lift it and repair, we would do that. If it's not, they would cut a piece in and reroute it.
I got lost a little bit of the numbers, but when this phase 2 is done and projected to be done in February 2022, what percentage of the total laterals will have been inspected?
At that point, it was completed approximately 7,000, and this will be an additional 2,000. And there will be still the pieces of...
So that's still 50%, only 50% inspected?
Fully inspected, yes. But in this case, it'd be, again, we were targeting a high priority because what happened is we, you know, ideally when we went into this thing, we thought, great, for, you know, 3.5, 4 million, we can get the whole city done. And but that's, you know, it was a little optimistic in terms of thinking that we could get through it. In other places, in the past history, there were a couple of cities that tried these legacy crossbore programs, and they found that they went to the curb, and they didn't have the same issues we did going beyond to the structure. And again, they went to the curb because there was a valve at the curb, and they said, that's our responsibility, we're kind of done. Which isn't really the right thing to do anyway, in my opinion. We chose to go all the way to the structure, and we made some assumptions about distances, average distances, to get a reasonable cost pricing range. And in parts of it, as you can imagine, in parts of it, it exceeded when we started finding that there are many more branches than we anticipated. And then the level of some of the laterals, we found things where normal typical laterals are 4, some are 3. We found some 2-inch branches that were suspect. We could not even get a camera through that. So now with this approach, with construction, we chose just those high priority ones that are key. You can see the first part is, you know, no EFB and high occupancy.
But is the idea that when you finish phase 2, there's going to be a phase 3 and a phase 4, or do you think
Depending on
you've done all of the high priority ones and the others just there just isn't time and money.
We'll have to do an assessment on it, because as you get to different pipe materials such as black wrap pipe, that was typically installed by open trench. And so there is some logic to not even bothering to do those. And that's an assessment we have to make after.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, if I could just add, so about 1,000 to 1,500 services are steel that we've come up with, 1,200?
No, I don't know how many are steel. I said we're.
No, I know, but I think that we've added up, though. I think there's over 1,000 services that are steel that were installed at one time or another throughout. So whatever that number is, steel pipe, as Robert was saying, black ripe is steel. It was trenched in at that point. It wasn't drilled in. So we know that priority we put way down on that list. So even though that there may be 18,000 services that are out there, there are some that are through these assumptions that we've made on these priority portions that are going to be probably not going to be even looked at that point. So, that's why we took these 4 priorities as the highest.
I had a couple, one question I had in the Exhibit A where you have the, you've listed the progress, sorry, what's it called, the guidelines for the steps you're going to take, and 2.3 is identify gaps in staff expertise needed to monitor and facilitate. It seems to me that it would make sense to bring that earlier in the process so that if there is a gap, there's an opportunity to actually fill that before.
Yes, that would be something as I agree with that piece. That's a piece that we do have some level of expertise, and where I think the audit finding was leading toward was that more of a database manager type would be a little more beneficial for us. So it really depends a bit too on the RFP and how much we put on the contractor to facilitate that aspect of it. But it's a very good point, because I do see that there should be a need to assess it early on so we know how we're going to deal with the RFP early on.
And just until recently, we've adopted the NASCO standard in terms of categorizing and classifying crossbores. And so with that in mind, we will in this request for proposals include additional training that's needed to bring us up to date and to make sure that happens.
So you're saying until there's an RFP, you don't know what the gap is in staff expertise because you don't know what portion staff will be doing?
Well, we have the leeway of, depending on how the proposer comes with the project, we have the leeway of deciding. When we did the initial project, they explained to us how their QA/QC process worked, and then we blended it in with our staffing level and the staff expertise at the time. Unfortunately, we lost an individual that was kind of a key role player midway through the project, and that type of things happen. But that's what we're going to do, is to match what we have in the proposer to our staffing needs. And things can be much more turnkey, obviously, or it could not be. And that's what we need to assess. And I agree, it should be as upfront as we can in the process.
Perhaps just to reinforce, this really is specific to the contract, the future contract. This was an issue that came up in the last Hydromax contract in terms of our ability to access and stay on top of the database that the contractor was producing through the inspections. So, as Robert pointed out, as we get moving forward into the new contract, ensuring that we're again looking at what the current tool is being used, the database tool, ensure that we've got people that are adequately trained in order to access, ensure that we're able to keep up with the results that the contractor's coming up with inspections and confirming that we're satisfied with the quality of the work.
So I think relatedly to this discussion, I just wanted to directly ask about the local paper a few months ago had a story about an audit of the cross-bore phase
Right.
1 and some sort of disturbing findings. And so I just wanted to directly ask if you could speak, Ed, to sort of why you ordered the audit, what were some of the findings, and what, because I think this addresses a little bit of
Right.
what's being done differently this time, but could you just like make that
Sure.
crystal clear?
Sure, I mean, it's, the sheet that we were referring to, this Exhibit A, it's actually the summary of the recommendations that came out of the audit. And so
This is it?
the findings, yes.
Okay.
Yes, and the numeric portions of the presentation done earlier, in terms of the number of services that were inspected, what could be confirmed as cleared and what couldn't be confirmed as cleared, would really, and also the dollars involved with the contract itself, was really what drove me to request the audit. You know, clearly, this is a significant investment, and recognizing, relatively speaking, we've got a very low level of the ability to clear, led to the questions. Just really wanting to make sure we looked at overall both the structure of the contract, our ability to stay on top of it, as well as the outcome, and quite frankly, that we got what we paid for.
So what, before the audit, was it understood that 5,856 had only been partially, did these numbers change as a result of the audit?
No.
These things were known, it was just like,
Right.
wow, that was a lot of money for not much inspection. It made you ask why was,
To a certain extent, yes. Well, in terms of the ability to clear. So lots of inspection was done, but it still didn't result in the ability to say those 5,000 laterals are confirmed clear of crossbores. And I think, you know, what we were looking for is the process, you know, in terms of the contracting process, the oversight, the ability to oversee by looking at the database and confirm the adequacy, the appropriateness of ultimately the invoices that we were charged, but also the backup that was used as a basis for the invoices. That was the audit exercise that we were looking for. And so as we go forward, these recommendations are clearly part of it. It actually did raise some of the questions on the applicability of the standard that we were using, this NASCO standard, and whether it was really worth the effort to classify a sewer lateral based on the condition of the lateral, as opposed to, and because there's a significant amount of effort that was expended in trying to classify the lateral as pristine to highly deteriorated.
Yeah.
When in reality, we cared less about that than whether there was a crossbore in the lateral.
Right.
So recognizing that was a little bit of a disconnect, we had some debate with the auditor as to whether or not that was specifically where we should be focused, as opposed to how do we restructure the next phase of the contract in a way that allows us to maximize the clearance rate. And so we've got some lessons learned around that, and also basically verified that we did get what we paid for. It was simply a much more labor-intensive effort than was originally anticipated.
I think when I was lucky enough to have quite a long chat with the crew when they were working the lateral at my house back during phase one. And I got to hear quite a bit about how hard it is to get a robot to work reliably in sewer line after sewer line after sewer line, and all the ways that it can break down. Of course, the utility staff has enlightened me even further into how tricky that is. So I think the audit makes a lot of sense in terms of how do you go after those last numbers. But in many ways, it's terrific to find the 26. The question is, ratio-wise, then
Right.
how do you find the other 20 or 18 or whatever it is? One question I have is, if you happen to believe that excess flow valves reduce the severity of the hazard significantly, is there another effort to retrofit with excess flow valves in parallel? And if not, just imagining that they cost $50 in volume, and then you spent 10 times $50 to install one with a plumber and MPT threads and so on, maybe $2 million gets you 2,000 laterals protected with an excess flow valve on the gas line. I don't know, I made those numbers up. But I keep I'm thinking about the problem where those 7,166 you inspected, boy, it would seem like the odds are reasonable that one of them now has a crossbore again. And if an excess flow valve then protected that service, maybe you take, using your same priority method, the hospitals and schools, okay, those all should have excess flow valves. Maybe they don't all have. So then maybe some amount of the crossbore funds somehow could go towards excess flow valves. 'Cause I don't know how else you stop this. If you don't either outlaw boring,
Right.
or get ready for crossbores. And if the only way I can think of to get ready for a crossbore is with a valve that's going to stop the gas.
You're right, we talked about a lot of that.
Yeah.
In fact, we talked about the cost of investigating all these crossbores versus the cost of self-contracting through someone's front yard.
Yeah,
The one thing about excess flow valves is it's not 100% stop.
I know,
And so.
but it's the main stop.
Yeah. And
And they could have a
has-
wire.
It has saved us too.
Yeah, you could put them into the smart grid that's going to go into the, they could have a little transmitter. I've never seen an excess flow valve with a transmitter, but I can imagine it. And it immediately sends a signal, I just protected, and then you would know or something.
Well, it's not 100%, but as Robert and what we're talking about is that, so any new service that gets put in, water or gas portion of it,
That gets-
everything is cambered before
Yeah.
it has whatever it's gas or water. Now, these excess flow valves, they actually get put right close to the main. So now you're digging up the street.
Oh, you're not putting them by the,
No, because see, if you think about it, it's, okay, so if we
I'm
have
with you.
one way up
I
here,
got it,
and I was gonna dig a fence post right here,
yeah,
it's not gonna do anything.
no.
So these excess flow valves get really pretty close to where the valve and where the main is. So when you come off the main, there's actually a service valve that gets buried right here. Right next to that, it's usually within that foot mark. That's where so that's out in the street.
Yeah.
So we would have to dig up every street, and we would have all these through there. It still makes sense. Now, that's why when we put a new service on, when we bore, we have a bore pit that's already open. That's where that
So
gets
that-
actually installed.
That's why you were smiling when I said $50.
I guess I can do it
A little
that
more than
cheap.
that.
That's right.
I think we've been looking at the cost of that recently, to retrofit. It's around 3,000 to 4,000 because, and a lot of it's the street cut fees
Yeah,
because we're going, we have got it.
got it.
And Main.
So I'm still unclear how we got here, particularly to a highly unfavorable Palo Alto weekly article based on the audit. The contractor seems to be very experienced. I can't imagine Palo Alto streets and everything that we're doing is that different our neighbors. Since San Bruno, people have been going like crazy. So I just don't understand why we are this far off.
From the first phase,
Yeah, I mean, the kind of numbers we came up
We-
with when we thought we were getting a 100% job, it's just,
So that
light years
was-
away.
Well,
it was pretty cutting edge at that time. I mean, utilities were not doing this. So there was not a lot of experience.
When was San Bruno? Because my impression is we've been out there checking all this stuff since San Bruno.
Well, they were doing, they were pursuing PG&E contracts after they were doing this contract. And, PG&E, I'm not gonna speak for PG&E. But it's a bit of a different approach. And some other gas utilities have different approaches called proximity clearance. And we're hedging on that a little bit in our assessment because now, you saw up to 10 feet. Other places basically go, oh, we're not even going to touch anything. And they clear things just because of this proximity clearance. Our initial assessment was no proximity clearance and that everything had to be verified via TV. and everything had to be verified without this construction component. And that's kind of how we got here. There's another group of laterals that, and that's part of this assessment in the first couple of months, that fall into the category of, they looked at everything physically possible in that lateral. However, as they were going around the bend, the camera lens itself couldn't see the inside of the bend. And so they couldn't clear that lateral. And that would, technically run into this proximity clearance aspect of it. And we are gonna have to evaluate whether we go after those, 1,000+ laterals or not. Right now, we're going after our priorities, and we're gonna stick to that formulation. But that's another avenue that we need to, further look at. Whether the ones that are completely televised, yet we're not cleared again because they could not see a bend, should we clear those? And how should we clear them?
So just to go back to your question, so the San Bruno was, that was not a cross-border issue. So it wasn't that triggered the concern. It was our senior engineer at the time, I think, raised the issue. He was becoming aware of it, and pushed and recommended that we do an inspection program. We can't talk for PG&E. I can just say a personal account. I had my father-in-law was one of those do-it-yourself guys, and about the time that we were kicking off the program here, so I was very much aware of the crossbores. He had a blockage and was going to rotor it himself, do it all himself, and I'm like, stop. And I tried to go on PG&E's website and find information about, call before you do this or what's going on. And I could find nothing. I took him to our website just so they could get an idea of what a crossbore was and what the dangers were. So I really do think we can say that we were ahead of the game. And in doing so, we learned some of the lessons.
And really to that point, or maybe to amplify, we also continually do outreach to plumbers within the area. Effectively a call before you snake a line outreach, and we've talked about other options that could be used to reinforce that as another avenue. And again, what we're focused on here is city-provided inspection. But in that case, when a homeowner or a plumbing company is out and snaking a line, that's really where the risk comes into play. And so trying to intervene, and at this point it's simply outreach, but at some point we may want to pursue a regulatory approach that requires, not unlike dig alert, underground service alert, notification, in order to ensure that we're really maximizing the likelihood of being notified prior to a line being snaked. Now, for the do-it-yourselfer though, there's always that will get past us.
We also tried to dig a well in Scotland.
What if when following the RFP process, what if when, if you come back again, that's on the agenda, we can talk about that when it's a topic time. What if you, I remember in the, I think the last presentation a couple of years ago, you had some images of how complex the robot was that let you put the camera up the lateral. That might be very helpful to give some perspective into, how do you end up, you cleared like a third, you inspected but couldn't completely verify a third. How could that happen? So I think once we can all visualize that, like, oh yeah, I can see how you get a ball of roots and all of a sudden you can't see around the corner, and the poor little camera that the robot is stuck with an arm up the lateral, what's it gonna do? And so we really got I hate to say it, we've got a technical problem. And of course, see what the RFP brings in terms of new solutions, but I think that would be helpful for my peers.
Good, agreed, thank you.
Okay. All right. Agenda item 2, new business, the utility strategy plan.
Figure out how to switch this. You know, that's it? Okay, thanks.
Thank
Okay, I think we'll make this a relatively brief presentation since the commission heard this, was it just last month? It was just last month, although we had the holidays intervening. Quick recap on our effort to develop our 2018 Utility Strategic Plan. Just to give you a quick overview, so you've been directly involved with our process. It has involved stakeholder engagement, both clearly heavy engagement with staff, as well as a series of customer outreach meetings, including small groups, as well as the large workshop that the commission suggested, resulting in a number of plan elements that I'll do a quick walkthrough. And really what's new in this month's presentation is the inclusion of the key performance indicators, and move that forward from here to the City Council. So in terms of our process, we have, let's see if I can get this, there it is, to show you our timeline, really beginning during the summer to here we are in 2018 already. So we're calling this our 2018 Utility Strategic Plan that has involved a series of our internal staff workshops, as well as external, using a staff team as the basis for development of the elements of the plan, external stakeholders and touch points with the Utility Advisory Commission, as well as through information with the City Council. Again, recap, our prior 2011 strategic plan had a construct that really attempted to encompass all of the various elements of what the Utilities Department does through a series of perspectives in terms of our financial resources, people, technology, business processes, and ultimate results for customers. This go around, we've changed some of the focus, and instead of trying to comprehensively include everything that we do, really focus on priority areas that have been identified as whether it be pain points on one end of the extreme to simply areas that we know that we need to focus on from issues that have arisen both through the organization or in interaction with our customer base, and has resulted in an overall statement of our recap of our mission and our strategic direction to priority areas that ultimately result in specific actions that we'll walk through both near term as well as in future years. Won't really go through this other than to note that in terms of the way that we've attempted to communicate our mission, safety, reliability, and environmental sustainability, really key to what the Utilities Department does, and really here focus on taking stock in our workforce and the work that our staff do in order to deliver services to the community. The structure of the priority areas that we have included in our strategic plan reflect these four specific focus area: workforce, collaboration, technology, and finances and resources as themes that we have identified specific strategies and actions in. And I'll just do a quick walkthrough on some of the key actions that are our immediate priorities. You'll see these numbers, action number 1 and 2 under our strategy that reflect a number of, or a subset of the overall actions that we've got that really are intended to lay out over several years. But these actions that are listed on these slides reflecting things that we're taking on immediately after adoption, or in some cases already underway. So just quickly under workforce, again, our statement here, we must create a vibrant and competitive environment that attracts, retains, and invests in our skilled and engaged workforce, recognizing that our utilities department actually represents about a quarter of the citywide workforce. So it really is a significant component of the city as a whole. And in order to ensure that we're focused on the actions that will allow us to kind of move the needle on ensuring an engaged and effective workforce, we've added the key performance indicators. Last month we talked about them in concept. Now we've had an opportunity to include some specific, these are to a certain extent placeholders in that we expect that through experience we'll have some refinement of both turnover rate as an example of the kind of performance indicator that we're tracking, as well as the threshold that we're really attempting to beat. In this case, showing this 10% annual turnover, or actually 3-year average turnover over the course of the next couple of years. Here, that our our vacancy rate effectively is 10% or less, and that we're able to fill 100% of our critical positions within 90 days. I'll tell you right now, I think our vacancy rate has hovered in the 13 to 15% rate, so this would require us to really, in many cases, be much more aggressive in our ability to fill those positions. And that we talked last month about some of the measures for how we're tracking our employee engagement, and this 100% of employees implementing individual development plans that will be used as our way of rolling up our priorities as a department.
Do you know, before you go, what the turnover rate is today?
Dave, you happen to know that number?
I can look it up. Give me a few minutes.
Okay. I knew you were going to ask that, or someone would ask that. All right, so we'll keep walking through this and come back to that. Collaboration, another key focus area for us as an organization. Jump again down to the key performance indicators here. Customer satisfaction being an important one. We do this annually through a survey and focusing on 85% or higher, excellent or good reaction or response. That customer awareness of our key programs or initiatives are 50% or higher. Again, simply an indication that we're being effective in communicating what those programs are. And finally here, in terms of collaboration internal to the organization, that 60% or more of our employees agree, and we do this through regular surveys, that they contributed or were involved with decisions that directly affect their work or their role. So these are some new measures that we'll be using here. In terms of technology, our key performance indicators here being our market penetration in use of the My Utilities account applications that we have online, increased by 10%. The utilization, let's see if the wording here is correct. 10% utilization by 5% each year, so increase by 5% each year, or actually increase users by 10%, and that they're actively using it by 5% each year. Another that we increase the use of paperless tools for our field support staff to get to 50% of tools available by December of this year, and 90% by next year. And to have 100% staff trained on applicable new technologies. So as we roll out new technologies within the organization, that all of our staff that may touch those technologies are adequately trained on that. And then finally, in terms of finances and resources, this is quite a bit of a to-do list. So we've got 2 sheets here. Our key performance indicators shown here, that 90% of our critical assets would be input into our asset management system within the next 3 years, and that in terms of actual replacement on an ongoing proactive replacement, we're able to accomplish 80% of that and 90% of maintenance activities each year. And finally, that in terms of kind of the bottom line here, that we are at or below median residential and commercial bills versus our surrounding communities, and that's something that we do track on a regular basis. Again, just to roll back up in terms of how these individual priorities and strategies fit within each of the 4 priority areas. We've got teams that are being organized. We've had a team that's been involved in the development of the plan. Now we're moving into allowing them to graduate, as the case may be, and re-enlist, assuming that they're interested in continuing in the effort to now move into the implementation. As we said, some of them have volunteered and some have been voluntold that they're going to be participating in this. Many of the folks in the room, as it happens, that will be participating in this going forward. And then, subject to your discussion here tonight, the plan is to bring it forward for city council discussion and hopefully approval on March 5th. So once the city council is now back in its routine, and then proceed with our organizational alignment steps and implementation from there. So that concludes the presentation. I'm happy to engage in questions or discussion from there.
Real quick to answer the
Oh, yes.
turnover question. So the average in the last 5 years is about 8%, 3% from retirement, 5% from voluntary. So we'll expect the retirement rate to probably go up in the next few years.
Yes, we do definitely expect it to go up.
Sorry, could you say that again?
Yeah, so it's 3% for retirement and 5% for voluntary separation. In the last 5 years, that's the average. It's ranged anywhere from 5% to 10%.
I think we'd expect that retirement figure to go at least up to 5%, if not more, over the next, say, 2 to 3 years.
Judith?
Hi.
Hello.
So, my first request is that the city adopt the standard industry nomenclature for AMI as advanced metering infrastructure. I've noticed that the consultant has continued to use automated meter readings, meter infrastructure, and it's in a couple of spots there, and that is confusing because it's automatic meter reading if you're doing AMR, and so I would, if we're going to educate everybody about what to call it, AMI stands for advanced. Okay, so if that could just be corrected wherever
Global.
the word
Yes, that's
automated
good.
has been used, okay?
Don't think we have any particular stake in that issue, so good.
So that is one thing that,
Great.
okay, there we go. Okay, on the workforce issue, one of the things that I did not see in there was any mention of issues around co-housing and creative solutions for, because since one of the big problems of getting people to join the utility is to be able to live in the area, that seems to me to be one of the major problems to be solved. So looking at sort of the living arrangements or what's something that might be possible to do is, I think, an important thing that needs to be there. And I also think, and this is one of the things that came up at the community meeting, was the idea of career development at local community colleges and universities, because these are already people who have figured out how to live here. So it seems to me that it would be a really good idea to recruit from people who are already in the area. And so I thought that was something that I didn't see there that I'd like to see added. Another point on the collaboration is that I really want to talk about the idea of having the word listen there. I think that utilities, not just ours, but it is really common that that there's all this thing about we're going to do customer education, as if we're going to teach everybody how to be electrical engineers. And I think it is really important for if we're going to talk about our strategic plan, to look at how do we develop a listening organization, because one of the things that's so great about being in this business is that every single person you talk to is a customer. Okay, so it isn't hard to sort of talk to people and find out. And I know I'm probably boring at parties because I actually talk to people about this stuff. But I think that it's reasonable, and so I really would like to see the word listen somewhere in there. When we got into, also on collaboration, there was, I just didn't understand why on sort of strategy 3, action 1, it said support the implementation of the utilities technology roadmap with comprehensive communication of advancements, long-term goal, and this is something full implementation scheduled for completion by 2022. That just seemed an awfully long way out for that. I didn't understand why that needed to be so far away. And establishing on Action 5, establishing the intra-departmental team to evaluate and determine best practices for an outage management system, including communication across divisions to reduce restoration time and provide customers with more real-time outage, complete by June 2019. I think that is way too long, and it is unconscionable to think that we would wait till 2019 to fix that. I think that's something that I also want to see adding to our topics. And on Action 3, I just wanted to know what that meant. On Strategy 4, Action 3, communicate our public awareness efforts and resources with government agencies like DOE, EPA, CEC to improve public and stakeholder awareness of utility issues, programs, and shared goals. What does that mean?
Catherine, you want to respond to that? You may want to take the opportunity to cover any of the
Are
other-
we trying to educate DOE of what we're doing, or what does that mean? I didn't understand that.
As you know, the nature of collaboration involves communicating with not just our internal stakeholders, meaning our employees, our staff, also our customers, right? But also other agencies that work within the utility realm that may work on similar programs or issues that we face. For example.
So you're saying that that Palo Alto is supposed to be educating DOE, or are we telling them what we're doing?
No, it's about collaborating with other agencies because there are similar best practices that we can share and resources that we can also share. For example, if there is a benefit to working jointly with another agency and we can leverage perhaps some economies of scale, we could see some benefit to that, to our utility and to our customers. So we do participate in a number of regional, state, and federal committees in order to talk with our cohorts of other agencies.
Okay, so I just didn't, that wasn't clear to me.
Share those best practices.
That wasn't clear to me, but because I am certainly in favor of you guys coming to DOE events and whatever, and as I said, this Voices of Experience for AMI initiative that they're starting this next week, I would really love to see Palo Alto sort of get involved and be there, though I think we have a lot that we can absorb.
Mhm.
Then on the technology side, again, Strategy 3 seemed, number 4 seemed really slow, okay, to wait till 2019. But here's the thing, if we don't have AMI, okay, then we can't give real-time information. So if we don't have endpoint devices installed, we can't give real-time information. So it's kind of like we can certainly improve how we talk to customers immediately. We don't have to wait, okay? But we're not going to be able to give real-time, if we're not installing the equipment until 20 or 22, we're not going to be able to give them real-time information in 19. Okay, so I think that one needs to be aligned. And then Action 5 on Strategy 4, ensure that CPAU systems keep pace with customer adoption of new technologies to enhance the customer experience. I think the horse has already left the barn and we're a little slow there. We're not keeping pace and we're playing catch up. And again, I think somebody has to be the back half of who's doing this stuff. And again, I just would encourage us to be honest and understand that we're in catch-up mode, and it's great, and we have this incredibly technologically aware customer base who are not going to wait for the utility if they're interested in it. They're pushing it forward. So I think from a strategic standpoint, it's really more conceptually of how are we going to catch up with our constituents, okay, with our residents. And then, again, I was really glad to see on Technology Strategy 5, implement continuous education and evaluation of new technology applications. I thought that was great that that was in there. I was really pleased to see that. And then I'm assuming that attachment B was the old plan. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so that what was in there wasn't necessarily, okay, so.
Correct.
So I'm glad we're doing that, but there's a huge body of evidence out there of what works and what can be helpful, and we do not have to reinvent the wheel. We can leapfrog ahead. There's all kinds of third-party products that can help us along that we don't have to reinvent. And I just encourage that the strategic plan consider that, and that we don't act like this is new. Because I think we can move faster if we recognize that.
Fair point. Any staff want to have a perspective on the comments?
Good evening, I'm Senior Resource Coordinator Padilla. I just had one response in regard to your comment or question about the timing of AMI.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was raised by Commissioner Johnson as well.
Right.
And I think we responded to it in the UAC memo. It's really because we have to get, the city has to be fully integrated with the enterprise resource
Management. Planning.
Never.
ERP. You got it.
So that has to come first, and then at the same time, we're working on the development of a new customer information system. So there's kind of a staging process that's going on here, and that's the reason for the,
Right, so I just want to say, in terms of what can happen in parallel and how things are done, is that if a big part of AMI and having it be successful is understanding what you're trying to do with it, okay, and speccing out how you're going to do it. If the customer information system, the CIS, has to be, if you don't spec that in concert with what you want to do with AMI, you end up with a CIS that doesn't necessarily have all the features that you want. And I think in terms of how these things work together, it works better. You know, there are different ways that AMI have been implemented, and in some situations they put the back end in first, and in other situations they put the front end first. So there is plenty of, call it, evidence that it can be done in more than one way. And so I happen to think back end first has a lot of merit because you get value on day one, okay, if you have the back end in first. But if you do the planning in parallel so that you understand the interdependencies, those have been the most successful projects. And I would encourage that we look at doing it that way.
So I can comment on that. So we are currently specking out the CIS, and we are including the AMI requirements. I think we have like 50 to 100 MDM requirements in the CIS system that should functionality in the minimums at least. And then in parallel, once we get the business case approved, we plan to spec out the AMI technology, the MDM system, the meter, brand, manufacturer, and at least have all those prepared for rollout when the CIS is implemented. So they are working in parallel in a way.
Good.
The planning and so.
But, and I really encourage a functional spec, which doesn't always happen.
Okay. Anyone from the next?
These are minor comments. I was a little confused by the format. In the memo, the key performance indicators were kind of in the front, and then you had the priorities and strategies and so on. But I think it probably does work better if the key performance indicators are with the priorities, the way you have it in on the slide. And I'll just make the pitch again that there are a number of acronyms that are used in here, and I think it's helpful the first time an acronym is used to kind of spell it out. And then after that, you can reuse it. But then if somebody is reading through this and they don't know what that acronym is, they can go back earlier in the document and find it spelled out.
Common affliction.
Let's see, I have a smattering of comments. One is in the, I guess it's page 4, the strategic plan summary, the bullet point about workforce, how to attract new staff or millennials. I just want to flag, like, I don't know that putting in a public document that you're targeting a certain age group is a particularly good thing to do. I would hate for the city to be accused of age discrimination, and personally I would welcome qualified staff in their 40s or 50s, as long as they've got qualifications and some time to train up and contribute to their position. So I guess I'm saying I really think we should delete that.
Yes, very good.
Can I ask a question on that? Was the intent to go after sort of people in recent college, I don't know how to say this right, recent college grads, people at sort of the beginning of their career, was that the intent as opposed to a specific age, but people with...
Well, there's another part of the strategic plan where they talk about recruiting from local colleges. You know, I mean, I think that's, but you don't know if the local college grad is in their 40s or 50s.
Exactly.
So I think that it should be
It's a good catch.
stripped of any insinuation of a particular age. Let's see. I would echo Commissioner Schwartz's suggestion of sort of promoting listening within collaboration. And yeah, I'm not going to comb through every strategy. I'll call out a couple that I was pleased to see in Priority 4 on page 14. I was pleased to see Strategy 5, engaging stakeholders and defining the role in supporting facilitating community resiliency and really understanding what that means to people and what's important to them, and defining and communicating back sort of a plan of minimum emergency service commitments, and because that also comes with a price tag, so it's really important to understand what's important to people and have sort of, you know, tiers of options at different price points for different levels of service. And I was pleased to see also on page 14, Strategy 4, Action 3, evaluating recycled water and other non-potable water sources. And I was pleased to see that that's going to be happening in this year in 2018. And then my only other sort of overall comment, which might not be what you're looking for in the rearview mirror, but I do want to mention that NewGen, the consultant, and Tony Georges, maybe he was useful in sort of a CPA internal stakeholder context. I found him to be singularly uninspiring when he appeared before the UAC, and his slide deck was simultaneously, I think, too simplistic for the UAC and too confusing for the community outreach, and like full of pictures of iPhones and liquid natural gas like export facilities, and it was like, it felt like it was a slide deck he's had for 5 years and has been using on all of his clients. And, you know, so I hope he did make a contribution someplace else that justified the city spending money on that consultant engagement. That's it for me.
Thank you.
Sorry, I have one more comment, and that is, you have a lot of target dates in here. And I think it would be helpful to have another cut at this, which is to list out all of the target dates kind of in chronological order, so you can kind of see what dates are coming up that you should be focused on and that we can focus on.
Great. Yes, we do have that, so we'll certainly be bringing it forward as it applies for work plan.
Yeah, so I had a couple on the higher level. So on the new CPA values, I don't see anything about sort of financial responsibility or an economic side to it. So I see accountability, but I think that more responsibility, but maybe that's what you mean. But it seems to me that should be in there too. And then I'm still a little tripped up on the strategic destination statement. In the memo, it talks about that it should tell us where we want to be in 5 years as a stake in the ground. And
So much.
I don't feel like I can read this and it gives me any sense of direction for 5 years from now. Or to put it another way, if I, in 5 years, look back, I wouldn't even know how to reconcile what we've done with this.
I think fair point that we struggled with that. So, point taken.
I was figuring that the resiliency type things would be under technology, but I figured out that they were under collaboration strategy 2, action 2, where we have the item to explore processes, and I got really happy when I got to the word implement. So I'm on board. I know it's hard to make everybody happy when you make a strategy, so I was happy to see that added in there, and I'm interpreting that as meaning resiliency.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think your request of us is to approve this with the comments and feedback. Do you want to table that and make little tweaks and then we approve it in the next meeting? Or do you want us to talk about it and come up with a motion where we approve it with some changes? Or?
I think really at your pleasure, given the range of comments that have been made, I think in many cases we can pick this up through wording changes. So we'd be happy to simply follow up based on that. Your next meeting is actually only in a couple of weeks, or 2 to 3 weeks. So we could take a shot at getting the revisions between now and then. Again, to whatever your pleasure is.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
Because this one had to.
Now you're going to weight it towards one thing or the other.
Well, it has to do with like the key performance indicators relative to financial resources, and it kind of relates to something you were saying. So it says, 80% of critical component replacement, 90% maintenance annually, and median or below residential commercial bills versus surrounding communities. And, we're locked into some cost of service issues, okay? That are regulated by law. So if we have been deferring maintenance for a really long time to keep costs down, to keep, whatever the reason was that we've been deferring it, and we have a bunch of things to do so that every time it rains, we don't have a power outage somewhere in town, things like that, that they may not all be possible.
Right.
So we may not be able to have the lowest prices in town and do all the maintenance we need to do. And so I think that these are intersecting, and trade-offs. And so, again, rather than come up with a KPI that you couldn't possibly meet all of them, maybe it's that we should get our arms around what really the trade-offs are of what we're doing. And so it may be, and to Commissioner Purcell's point, it's that if people really understood what it cost to underground everything and then have to dig things up every time there's a problem because the water gets down there and whatever, they might not really want it so much, okay? And so I think this trade-off of what it is so that you understand the implications is an important part of conscious management of these assets and resources. So I think that's a little too simplistic. So I'd rather, to me, that's not just wordsmithing. That's sort of a substantive thing that, if we have to talk about it more at the next, we've got room on the agenda. So I think it would be worth doing it. I realize it's not necessarily an easy thing to do, but I think we need to kind of elevate those sort of issues.
So a couple of thoughts. One, certainly no problem bringing this back. On that particular issue, I would suggest that, in effect, what we're headed down the path on is that these KPIs are for tracking. They're not really going to drive our decisions. And in fact, to your point, they may drive them at the operational level that then raise the conflict, should it ultimately be identified as conflict, that we, both at management and with UAC, would then say, we may need to consciously raise our rates, recognizing that this is the reason we're raising it, and perhaps, and again, this is overly simplistic, but recognize that we won't be below the median of others in a particular instance, but have full justification for it. I think it just enables us to make those decisions in a much more explicit and conscious manner, more so than.
But key performance indicators, often people's bonuses are tied to those or whatever.
That
and
won't be the case here, I can promise you that.
Okay, and, or things like, how, outage percentages, things like that, where we may not always be tracking accurately what is out there, so we really don't want to have people's performance bonuses tied to that. We want, accuracy and those kinds of things, so I think that,
Perverse
I don't know
incentives,
if
to your
that.
point. We don't want to create any perverse incentives.
Exactly.
Right.
So maybe that's one of the things that needs to be added as a statement in the, in the strategies and actions of that you make sure that as you're evaluating the key performance indicators, because like, for example, one that was in one of the other slides had to do with the one about the 50% of people being aware of something. Well,
Right.
let's assume there was a program that was only going to really be applicable to 10% of the community. Who cares if the other, that you don't necessarily need another 40% to care, if you've got something that's targeted. So I just think that sometimes these can be made in kind of an arbitrary fashion. Now, if you say it helps you because you have that as a reference point, okay, then I guess a statement of how you're going to use them might be useful.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
Maybe on that one, it's 50% of the affected community.
Right.
I mean, it might be something that's, you need 100%, if everybody's gonna have a choice of what pricing plan they're gonna use, you need 100% to know, even if you have a default, you at least have to have everybody know that they're getting a default, that kind of thing.
Okay, good. All right, so when we bring it back to your next meeting?
Okay. So then that brings us to item 3, which is a selection of potential topics for future UAC meetings. And before we share thoughts, or you share thoughts, Jeff had comments for that topic.
Okay, I just wanted to mention that in this packet, you got the utilities quarterly update, yay. But it was missing what the last fourth quarter update had about reliability data. And it seems to me like you ought to be concerned about reliability, if we're concerned about the fourth transmission line, taking out the whole city, you ought to also be concerned about, the 2,000 homes at once that get taken out by something that's small. So I'd like to see that put back. And could you possibly get it agendized, so as an official act, you as UAC could ask for it to get put back? And along the same lines, in the very old days, each utilities quarterly update used to be put on the agenda as an agendized item, so that if commissioners had comments to make, we could make it right there at that very meeting. I thought that was an excellent idea, and I don't know why we stopped doing it, but again, could you possibly agendize an item on one of your meetings that say, let's get back to agendizing each quarterly update as it comes out? Thanks.
So if I could perhaps just use the moment to set the stage for this discussion. We do have your forecast 12-month rolling calendar as a part of the
And just for, let me just mention that we should make sure we have the one that says revised.
Yes.
Oh,
Commissioner
I
Trumbull
don't-
set me straight that that's
Oh,
the,
I don't,
I think it's on.
oh, here.
If you want to call that to your
Okay.
attention.
Oh, good.
The original version had nothing shown in February for
Yeah,
the
we were-
UAC, and we realized, whoops, that's, well, for a couple of reasons. One, that wasn't complete, and second, we actually had some additional items that we wanted to put on your agenda. So let me do a quick walkthrough on those, and largely also based on our pre-call with the chair and vice chair. The February docket should now show a fiber update. Next steps on resilience planning, which is a follow-on to our discussion here regarding the strategic plan. Preliminary financial forecasts and rate changes for electric, gas, wastewater, and water utilities, and an update on or a status report on our outage management system. So we actually now have filled up your February agenda, and we'll also bring back the strategic plan for discussion. Beyond that, perhaps I won't go through the specifics of what we've got on the March and further agendas. I would like to kind of share a perspective on this topic of future agendas. This is an interesting topic, and also one that I'm occasionally reminded of, and how different these conversations have gone versus the Belfong days. In that, as I understand it, well, this isn't fair, but so I'll just kind of shortcut it. That basically, there was very little opening for commission suggestion of topics to be put on future agendas. And for good reason, that staff has a pretty full plate. We've got work plans, and in particular now with the strategic plan, we have an even more kind of robust work plan of issues and projects that all of the staff here and the staff that report to them are responsible for. And so, to a certain extent, one could argue that we've got lots of things to bring forward to you, and so additional things that come from the UAC can be seen as something of an additional burden. And so, I want to be respectful of the balance that we have there, while at the same time, I think the nature of the interaction we currently have with the UAC reflects the value that you as a body, and actually the expertise that you individually bring to the topics and to the issues that are of importance to the city of Palo Alto. So when we get into the topics, I want to almost tongue-in-cheek say, don't feel compelled to make up things for us to talk about in future agendas, because we are more than comfortable bringing things to you, while at the same time, really do value the additional perspectives that you bring, both in terms of the issues that you're interested in, as well as really respecting the what we sometimes refer to as the oversight role that the UAC plays. And so that means that sometimes things hit your radar screen that wouldn't necessarily be on our work plan, or that as a result of not being on our work plan, something that we would bring to you. The cross-border discussion might be a good example of that. It's really one that has hit your radar screen because of media reports, because of what you're seeing in terms of what's coming out of the department, that you think, and for good reason, we should talk about, and that you, as a touchstone for us representing community interest, want to give us some feedback on. So that's perhaps a good example. And that do come up periodically on issues, again, that may not be predictable necessarily, much less one that appears on a 12-month work plan. So with that, I pass it back to you.
But I just want to say that, given that the strategic plan talks so much about collaboration, I just want to say thank you to you, because I think it's a lot better than it was in the previous. I mean, it was really hard, and I think this is much better to be able to have an exchange, and I feel like we get to hear from the staff more, and that we understand what's happening, and we have a sort of more, more collegial kind of, I just, tone of things, I really like it a lot better.
Thank you, and I think I can speak on behalf of staff that we value the input and the ability to have the two-way collaboration. So thank you.
Is there, as we think of things, maybe there's a way where if we come up with one, if we particularly highlight that all we really want to do is have a discussion agenda item, so that it's not necessarily one where it requires a detailed staff report.
Right.
Over time, I think we've all come to understand that there's an awful lot of work that goes into any one of the staff reports. And along those lines, I have a couple where I'm pretty sure you already think about them all the time, and it may be a discussion item just so that it shows up on the agenda, we can talk about it and all, kind of clear what's on our minds. One is, I'm wondering about, I don't know what you would call it, analysis of potential drought on power purchase. Given that it sure seems like we might be headed back into another drought cycle, and thinking about how much of an impact that was 2 years back. Maybe that's a discussion item where it's more, not a full-blown staff report, but you guys talking about how you're looking at that and how that.
Well, as it happens, we have one that is quite robust. We did this.
Together, mine
So yes, and in fact, we actually presented that at least a large portion of it at the last meeting or the meeting before that.
Got it.
There's some additional information we can provide to you there.
Yeah, I just want to add, so when we come back with the integrated resource plan, we'll have a big discussion of the different types of portfolios that we could have, including the current one, which has a whole lot of hydro fluctuation. And then also, when we were in the drought, we did provide regular reports to the UAC and to council about the impact of the drought.
Every meeting.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right.
Yeah, so,
we celebrated when those ended. Those regular monthly reports.
but we do monitor, we forecast our hydro resources every month, both the Calaveras one and the Western one. And we look at different scenarios and what that would do to our market purchases and to our overall rates and costs. So. But we can certainly provide more of a discussion on that.
So in the context of our integrated resource planning, when is that coming back?
The electric
That's in-
one.
Oh, April.
Ah, yes, okay.
April.
So perhaps we could incorporate.
So that's there.
Yeah. So
This
we-
issue as part of that.
Yeah,
Okay.
we have a pretty interesting and fact-filled presentation for April
Right.
on this huge analysis that we conducted, where we hired a consultant and a former employee to come back and look at all kinds of portfolios, and we really did some amazing stuff, and I think you're going to enjoy that presentation.
Yeah, and I just want to echo what you're saying, is that, there may be something that we just want to talk about, and maybe we add like an item there that we can just talk, that we don't need a staff report or expect you, but that we just want to talk about something that it feels current. Is there a reason that we can't do it, or,
I don't think so.
Not as long as we prepare for
Rules
it.
of
We'll
order.
put it on the agenda and we'll
Right.
provide sufficient detail, again, to notify the public.
or maybe it goes in commissioner comments or something. I mean, maybe that's where we do it, or something like that.
Yeah, but that's the debate we always get into.
Oh.
Right. It's better when it's on
Right.
the agenda.
Yes, yes.
Right.
So we can,
The second one that again, I know the answer to, from having asked it 2 or 3 times, is how strained our infrastructure is as EVs continue to build out. And I know the answer is that as you've analyzed that, we look okay. But I think that'd be a great one to have, somewhere through the year. And again, maybe it's simply a discussion when we all get to talk about it and worry about it, and then you say you shouldn't worry about it. I know that's not on the agenda, but,
well, actually, it's also part of what we're bringing forward on
In March.
in March in the,
So the assessment of the electric distribution system to effectively integrate DERS.
Integrate.
So you'll have it in there.
Oh, not integrate, yeah. So
Yeah.
DERS includes.
Includes
electric
EVs.
vehicles. Yeah,
yes, it
Okay.
does.
so that's coming in March.
And then we already talked about the idea of bringing back the crosswalk thing. That's
Yes.
the one. And I certainly liked Jeff's idea, and I see that you've already responded to his request and scheduled the first quarterly report on the March one. So that was fast.
On
I'm not promising that it was scheduled for discussion versus information, but we'll debate that. Fair point.
Others?
I just have a question for, our Councilman Philseth, are you going to stay as our liaison now that you're the vice mayor? Are we going to get somebody else, or?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
They haven't been out, they haven't been released yet, but I just figured somebody else showed.
Oh, we didn't know if we, we have to break in somebody new, or we get to keep
The
you.
1 in 9 chance.
Very helpful.
Right, somebody's arm wrestling you for the chance to come in front of us.
No idea.
Right, right.
Well, if you do go away as that, I want to say thank you.
By the way, the change in tenor of this, I attributed it all to the change in council liaison.
There you go. Who was the prior council?
Great.
I don't think I did.
Whoever was before.
You did?
No, we did.
Eric Philseth.
We did, but he didn't come all the time. It was not as dedicated.
Your regular attendance is much appreciated,
There you go.
Councilman.
I did, now that I have the benefit of the updated calendar on the resilience planning, next steps for February, will that have any discussion about the additional transmission line?
It wasn't intended to be specific to that, more kind of laying out we've conceptualized a couple of workshops that we would come back to UAC and use that as a venue for fleshing out how to develop a resilience strategy. And so that we'll want to come back to that and propose, here's the work plan we see, and get your feedback on whether you think that makes sense. So that's what we have in mind for February.
I would love to get an update on that. I know it's with Stanford, but beyond that, what that means.
Yes, we will find a way to more specifically give you both an update as well as our strategic plan now says we're going to get to a decision. A decision.
And they don't pick these people.
Okay.
And one other discussion is there's a lot of deferred maintenance that I see in the budget, and some update on that and how we're prioritizing that and paying for it.
Maybe that becomes part of the budget workshop.
Maybe so.
That would make sense.
And I know what happens is two of us are selected to go and work with the utility, and I got to do that one time, and you could.
I'd be happy to.
Great.
It's very helpful.
I'd love to.
Everything else goes on.
All right.
They appreciate that as well.
I don't have anything else.
Okay. All right.
Next meeting,
In that case,
just announcing.
yeah, we're in by,
February 7th.
so our next meeting is then scheduled for February 7th, and the meeting is adjourned.